Hello children, how are you my little masters and little ladies? Good to see you. Good to see your twinkling eyes, and I can see you have your glass of milk and cookies with you. You're all set to listen to the story, and I'm all ready, all excited to share this story. Again, I've chosen a story from my favorite children's author, Enid Blyton. It is from this book, Snicker Brownie, and I've told you, if you can remember, if you can recall, I did read out Snicker Brownie's mischievous story to you a couple of weeks back. So now the name of the story by Enid Blyton is The Great Big Fish. So let's see, where do we meet this great big fish and what does it have to do in the story? Ellen and Donald ran to the pier. Mother had given them 10 pence each to go on. It would be fun to run right out to the end and see the deep green sea there. "Why, we might see a big fish too," said Ellen. "Oh, I do wish we had a fishing rod like all the other fishermen on the pier have, Donald. I would so like to fish and catch a great big enormous fish." So these are the kids, Ellen and Donald, and they will be going to the pier. Pier is on the seaside, right? It's a boardwalk. It's a place where you can enjoy the sea right next to it. So let's listen to the conversation. "I believe these fishermen are going in for a fishing match," said Donald, as the two ran along the pier. "There are so many of them today." It was quite true. The fishermen were fishing that day for a prize. £5 was offered to the man who caught the biggest fish. The children looked in the baskets of all the fishermen as they passed. No one had caught a fish yet. So see how many people are participating with their fishing lines on the pier. Let's see. Suddenly, they came to old Mr. Brown. He lived next door to them and was the kindest old man you can imagine. Everybody loves kind people. It's such a good quality to have. He often gave them money and sweets, and once he had brought them a fine Easter egg full of tiny chocolate eggs and 2 yellow fluffy chicks. So he's a generous gentleman. "Have you caught a fish yet?" asked Ellen, stopping to talk to him. "Not yet," said old Mr. Brown. "I haven't had much luck lately. I think all the fish must know my line too well." He's a little kind of put off because he's been waiting for a very long time and he hasn't even caught a single fish. The children had a grand time on the pier. They looked at all the funny machines there and wished they had money to put in them. They watched the fishermen as they saw one after another pull up some fine fish. Old Mr. Brown caught one too, but it was very tiny. Oops! Then he pulled excitedly at his line and cried, "I've got a big one this time!" His rod bent till it almost broke. See? And maybe you guessed after looking at the picture what was at the other end of the line. "I've got a big one this time," he screamed. His rod bent till it almost broke, and then the line reeled up, and what do you suppose he had caught? Keep guessing. A big old boot that had once belonged to a fisherman. How everyone laughed. But don't you think it's a bit mean to laugh like that? Mr. Brown was disappointed. So were the children. The old man cut away the boot and it fell back into the sea with a splash. Then he put fresh bait on his hook and threw the line out again. He waited and waited and waited. The children had their lunch with them, so they sat down by him and waited too. But although the other fishermen caught many fish, old Mr. Brown couldn't seem to catch any more at all. I am quite stiff with sitting here so long, he said at last. I think I'll go for a trot around the pier and back again, children. Do you mind staying by my rod whilst I go? May I hold it for you, do you think? Asked Donald eagerly. I've never held a rod in my life. I'll be very careful. So kind old Mr. Brown let him hold the rod. Then off went the old man, trotting round the pier to stretch his legs. Ellen stood by Donald and watched the water into which the line disappeared. And then suddenly a most surprising and exciting thing happened. Guess what? The rod Donald was holding almost flew out of his hands. It was a good thing he had such a tight hold of it. It's a fish! It's a fish! Yelled Donald. Mr. Brown, where are you? Where are you? Mr. Brown! But Mr. Brown was right down at the end of the pier. Ellen got hold of the rod too. Wind this little wheel like Mr. Brown does. Wind it, she said to Donald. So he wound in the line, and the fish on the end tried its best not to come with the line. It pulled and jerked, but Donald held it fast. Another fisherman came to help, but Donald said he could manage. Ellen leaned over the pier railings and squealed with excitement. I can see the fish! I can see it! It's the most enormous big one! Ooh! Mr. Brown appeared again, and as soon as he saw what was happening, he rushed to Donald. He took his rod and began to play the fish, letting the line run out when the fish pulled very hard, and reeling it in when he had a chance. At last he had the fish. Another man had to catch it in a net as it came onto the pier, for it was so big. Whoa! Finally luck landed. The children were so excited that they could not stand still, jumped up and down all the time. Mr. Brown, your fish is the very biggest, they shouted. Oh, how much do you think it weighs? It was weighed on the scales, and it was 11 pounds. Have you seen a fish? See, it's being weighed on a weighing scale. Can you see it? Nice. Excuse me, may I have a sip of tea? Mr. Brown was so pleased. No one had caught such a big fish so far. Perhaps someone would catch a bigger one before the day was out. He would have to wait and see. The children waited too. Every time a fisherman caught a fish, they rushed to see how big it was. But no one caught such a big one as old Mr. Brown. At 5 o'clock, when the match ended, Mr. Brown was given the prize of 5 pounds. He was so mighty pleased that he simply couldn't help smiling, beaming away, right? Wow, how exciting. Finally, patience and kindness always rewards you, pays you back. Always remember that, my little ones. Oh, excuse me. I have to have it so I can read you better. Is that right? Thank you. You've had no tea, he said to the children. You have been two big bits of luck for me, haven't you? Come along and we'll go home and show this fine fish to everyone. Then we'll go and have a nice tea together in a tea shop. We will have shrimp sandwiches, chocolate cream buns and 2 ice creams each. Wow, yum, yum. But they deserve the treat, don't you think so? So off they all went, and how everyone stared in surprise at the great big fish they carried. Mother said of course they could go to tea with Mr. Brown, so they set off together to the tea shop. They all ate a most enormous tea, and Donald and Ellen thanked Mr. Brown very much and said they had never had such a lovely day in all their lives. Oh, it isn't finished? Yes, said Mr. Brown, beaming all over his red, shining face. Doesn't he remind you of Santa Claus? Beaming red face. You've got to have a bit of my prize, you know, for you helped to catch the big fish. Now, what do you think you would like, Ellen? A big doll? And you, Donald? A box of soldiers? I like a little fishing rod, please, said Donald. And Ellen would like one too. We would so like to go fishing ourselves. Right, said Mr. Brown. So he bought them both a fine fishing rod each. And then they went home to bed, carrying their new rods very proudly indeed. Tomorrow, what are they going to do? Yes, they are going fishing on the pier. I wish I could be there too to see the very first fish they catch. Don't you? See, here they were having tea with Mr. Brown, the kind old man, and here is the fishing lines they got as a gift. Because they had been such a great help and had been very sensible and strong. Well, so it was one happy day for them. So good things happen to good people. Always remember that. What goes around comes around. Now I have another story, and this is about a boy. Since there is a big movement going on about African American people, big lives, Black Lives Matter. So I just, this story really struck me, and I thought you would enjoy. It's an autobiography by Olaudah and Equiano, and he was a little black African child and he was kidnapped. So there's a small extract I thought I would share with you, so maybe you understand what people in 1800s, right, went through when they were picked up from Africa and taken to the West, especially United States, and there they were kept as slaves and they had to work in very harsh and cruel conditions. So, do you think color, creed, religion, culture, height, skin, beauty, richness, poverty make a difference? We are all human beings and we should love each other because we are all the same. And we should all love each other because we are different, so it becomes a little exciting in life. Is that right? We should not differentiate. Never. So let's listen to this. Olaudah Equiano was born in the 1750s in what is now eastern Nigeria. At this time, many local people were kidnapped by other Africans and were then sold on to slave dealers. They were taken to work as slaves in the Caribbean and British North America. Equiano and his sister were kidnapped when they were children. How sad. A very painful experience, being separated from your home, your family, your parents. When Equiano grew up, he wrote his autobiography, and in this extract he describes what happened when he and his sister were kidnapped and sold into slavery. One day, all our people were gone out to their works as usual, and only I and my dear sister were left to mind the house. 2 men and a woman got over our walls and in a moment seized us both. Without giving us time to cry out, they stopped our mouths and ran off with us into the nearest wood. Here they tied our hands and carried us as far as they could till night came on. We reached a small house where the robbers halted for refreshment and spent the night there. We were then unbound but were unable to take any food. We were quite overpowered by fatigue and grief, and our only relief was some sleep. See, he and his sister are sleeping somewhere, wherever these people, the robbers, took some rest and refreshments. The next morning, we left the house and continued traveling all the day. For a long time, we stayed in the woods, but at last we came into a road which I believed I knew. We had gone only a little way before I noticed that, just a moment. Thank you. Before I noticed some people at a distance. I began to cry out for their assistance, but my cries only made them tie me faster and stop my mouth, and their hands are tied. And then they put me into a large sack. They also stopped my sister's mouth and tied her hands. In this manner we proceeded till we were out of the sight of those people. When we went to see the following night, they offered us some victuals, but we refused it. That means food. The only comfort we had was in being in one another's arm all that night and bathing each other with our tears. Poor kids. But alas, we were soon deprived of even the small comfort of weeping together. The next day proved a great day, a day of greater sorrow than I had yet experienced. Why? For my sister, I were then separated. See the horror and the fear and the fright in there, and helplessness in the expressions as they're being separated. I cried and grieved continually. For several days I did not eat anything but whatever they forced into my mouth. At length, after many days of travelling, during which I had often changed masters, I got into the hands of a chieftain in a very pleasant country. So we see maybe he's been a little lucky. This man had 2 wives and some children, and they all treated me extremely well and did all they could do to comfort me. Particularly the first wife, who was something like my mother. See? So, he's been lucky. God knows where his sister went to. Although I was sad Although it was a great many days' journey from my father's house, yet these people spoke exactly the same language with us. I was there, I suppose, for about a month, and they at last used to let me go some little distance from the house. I used this opportunity to inquire the way to my own home. Sometimes, for the same purpose, I also went with the maidens to bring pitchers of water from the springs for the use of the house. So he's a very intelligent, courageous child. I had also noticed where the sun rose in the morning and set in the evening as I travelled along, and I had observed that my father's house was towards the rising of the sun. I, therefore, determined to seize the first opportunity of making my escape and to shape my course for that quarter. Equiano did attempt to run away and find his way home, but he was caught and brought back to his master. So sad. Later he was sold to a slave dealer and was taken to America. Here he had several masters and also served for a while in the British Navy. When he grew up, he purchased his own freedom and travelled widely. Later, he wrote his autobiography and travelled all over Britain making speeches against slavery and selling copies of his book. In 1792, he married Miss Cullen of Ely and became a small landowner. So now it's to begin with, it's a sad story, but it becomes a story of courage and bravery and strength and determination and focus and not giving up, perseverance. So that's what Equiano did. But how sad it must have been and how difficult. So this was an extract, and I thought it was very relevant for what's happening. Especially there are so many protests and strikes going on in the West all over, because, especially in America, because a black African American was cruelly killed by a white-skinned police officer. So those people think that that kind of an attitude is still lingering on. So we must always stand against such discrimination and differentiation and cruelty, shouldn't we? You are our future. So I hope you remember these stories and remember good virtues. Lovely to see you, and I love to see you again. Do send me your messages with names of the stories you want to listen to and any other suggestions. Lovely. Bye-bye. Have a nice evening.